For a limited time only, get your very own Zombie Killer t-shirt. A link is down below. How are all of you lovely people doing today? My name is John, and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Zombie Storyline Q&A. This is the series where I take your questions about the zombie storyline and I answer them. Whether it's a big, a small, or a simple question, I'm always happy to take them on. You can either leave your questions down below or tweet me at JohnnyJ25. While you're there, please follow me on Twitter. We're getting very close to 10,000 followers. If you guys could help me push myself over that edge, it would be much appreciated. Without further ado though, let's begin with today's episode. So today's episode will be kicked off with a question from Tristanator Plays Games, who asks, "Hey John, please explain why Takeo sees his friends die. Could this be a reference to Primis failing?" As many of you know, from the very beginning of Black Ops 3, we received a cipher that when solved gives us the message, although they have found the way, Primis will fail, and this has made us assume that at some point there's going to be some stumbling block that will cause the fate of the crew to be pretty grim. Maybe they'll die, or maybe everything will just end up failing and they won't like the way the world turns out by the end of things. And people would start to look at things in the story and go, maybe this is when they fail. Maybe this is when they fail. Maybe they'll fail like this. And we got a trailer not too long ago. It was the musical cinematic for Zetsubou no Shima, and there's a pretty interesting series of events that feature Takeo. So we have Takeo, and then before him he sees Richtofen dead on the ground, and the way he motions with his hands makes it look like as if he was responsible. We then cut to him sitting down again, and he sees Nikolai as well as Tank on the ground dead. He's then engulfed by the vines. We then see him again, and then we see Richtofen. And it's a weird sequence of events, and it makes you wonder, did Takeo kill Richtofen? Did Takeo kill the other two members of the crew? And that was a conclusion that a number of YouTubers initially jumped to, and I wanted to bring this up and talk about it. In fact, we talked about it on a recent episode of Zombros, which you guys will be seeing tomorrow, and we really get into it. Me and Money Talk specifically debate what exactly we're seeing in this image, because it's not clear. I want to give you guys my best analysis of this sequence of images, and you guys can then make up your own mind of what's actually happening in this series. So the first thing people will suggest is that Takeo killed Richtofen. You could look at the way he looks at his hands, and it makes it almost seem ominous, like, oh my goodness, I just murdered him with these hands. And that could be the possibility, but that gets difficult to explain, because where's the motive? Why does Takeo kill Richtofen, and why has this not been mentioned previously at all or during Zetsubou no Shima? So that doesn't make much sense, and when people immediately jump to the conclusion that Takeo killed Richtofen, I go, hold up, you're jumping to conclusions, and I think you're grasping at leads that aren't quite there. This leaves some other possibilities. What if Takeo is hallucinating? Now this is my best guess. There are a lot of hallucinations in Zetsubou no Shima. People have had those red blood hallucinations. They're everywhere. And what if Takeo is just hallucinating yet again? So here's how the sequence of events could play out in the form of a hallucination. Takeo sits down and he starts hallucinating. He sees many things. The first thing he sees is Richtofen dead on the ground. He's confused and he looks at his hands and goes, did I do that? Because he's in a hallucination. He doesn't understand what he's seeing. He then jumps, and this time he sees Nikolai and Tank on the ground, and he's confused why they're dead too. All his friends surrounding him are suddenly gone. They've been murdered somehow. Then he gets engulfed by the vines, and he wakes up, and this is when the hallucination ends. He sees the airplane pass the sky, and at the same exact moment, Richtofen sees the same exact airplane. Now I want you to use the airplane as a reference point. Because they both see the same exact airplane at the same exact time, we know for a fact that they are in the same exact reality, the same exact universe, and in this universe, they're both alive. So if that's the case, if they're both alive, how does Takeo see them dead on the ground? Well, maybe it is a hallucination. You could also suggest that maybe it plays into the multiverse theory. I know Money Talks and I debated this a little bit on Zombros, and he suggested that maybe we are seeing a cycle, and every time our characters die, the cycle repeats. And in this scenario, Takeo was the last standing character. Richtofen died, Nikolai died, Tank died, and when he died, they began a new cycle and they started over. But my issue with this theory, this idea that they're in an infinitely repeating cycle, is that there's no mention of it. We've been in infinitely repeating cycles, and there have been references of it. In Die Rise, we saw Richtofen explicitly mention it, and we actually physically experienced it in Mob of the Dead. There are no references to a cycle in Zetsubou no Shima, which makes me think there probably isn't a cycle going on, and if there was, I'm not sure the characters are even capable of doing such a feat, because there has not been any mention of them being capable of repeating a cycle or going back in time without the aid of a time machine. So, if you ask me, when you look at this sequence and you see our characters dead on the ground, what I assume is that Takeo is hallucinating. Maybe part of it is him fusing with the many different universes as some of our characters are experiencing. And maybe part of it is the element 115 messing with his head, as well as many of the other things that are floating around on this island. This island is full of contaminants and toxinogens, and it's not too far-fetched to say that it's starting to get to Takeo's head, and our characters are kind of going insane right now, so it isn't far-fetched for him to see these hallucinations. I will say, though, I don't think it's relevant to the story. What we need to understand is that the story is going to continue to move. We're going to move to Stalingrad. We've completed the job we've needed to do in Zetsubou no Shima. Maybe seeing our characters dead on the ground is foreshadowing, and maybe it's a reference to Primis dying, but for the sake of the progression of the story, it's not really an important thing to talk about right now, because it hasn't been referenced at all in-game, and it seems like we're moving forward, we're going beyond that, so it isn't something we need to dwell on for hours. Moving on, we now have a question from Sammy J on Twitter, who asks, Johnny, I noticed that no one has yet to touch base on how the summoning key got in the crate in Shadows of Evil. Do you have any idea on how it got there? This is something that a number of people have pointed out to me. Suddenly they think they're very clever and they go, hey John, if this is the most important artifact in the universe, why is it sitting in the back of a truck? And I'll admit, it's a good question. This device is pretty powerful and we've seen it do some incredible things, so how did it just end up in the back of a truck on a crate left in the middle of a dark alley? Well, we actually have a cipher in Der Eisendrache that answers that question. When you solve this cipher, you receive the message, I met the reporter who was to deliver the artifact. He says he was going to bring it on his truck in a crate, but when I arrived, the reporter was babbling and acting wildly, waving a letter in his hand telling me to stay away. The crate containing the artifact had been sealed with some ancient magic. When I told him I must have had the artifact and moved towards the crate, he attacked me. I acted in self-defense, stabbing him in the chest. There is a reporter that we actually learn about in Shadows of Evil. That may be the reporter that's being referred to in this cipher. Now, because it's written on Group 935 parchment, I assume that this is a Group 935 scientist, and he was tasked with retrieving the summoning key. They must have been aware of this artifact and wanted to get their hands on it. It would make sense that Group 935 would want this device. Now, when he says it's on the back of a truck, and it's in a crate, and it's surrounded by ancient magic, it can only refer to the summoning key in Shadows of Evil. That's what he has to mean when he discusses the artifact. There's no other explanation. And while it does seem weird that this object is just on a crate in the back of a truck, you have to realize that there was a setup to it. So it was actually being delivered to the scientist, but it was protected. Because it had this black magic around it, you couldn't just break into it. You'll notice in game, you can try all you want to destroy this crate. You can knife it, you can shoot it, you can do all sorts of things, but it doesn't open. It only opens when you become the beast, and the beast has enough power to break this magic seal around the box. So while it is just sitting on a crate in the middle of an alley, it's being protected by magic. Today's episode will end with a question from Alexandros Xenophontes. I hope I said that correctly. He asks, is Richtofen's soul inside the summoning key? I wanted to touch base on this question because a number of people get confused by the summoning key and they kind of lose track of who's in the summoning key. So we're going to go map by map and I'm going to explain who is in the summoning key. Within Shadows of Evil, we use the summoning key a number of times. We first go through all the rituals, but we flush out those people. We get rid of them when we open up the Pack-a-Punch. We then get the Shadow Man into the summoning key. He is the last person we took into the summoning key before Richtofen steals it. Now this is interesting. We don't know if Richtofen knows the Shadow Man is in the summoning key, which could prove to be a problem and a potential plot twist later on in the story. Treyarch may assume that we forget about him and Richtofen is unaware of him. He goes and does his plan and pop out comes the Shadow Man, and maybe he spawns in the Overlords and that becomes a potential problem for our characters to solve. That's a very likely possibility. Now, once Richtofen steals the summoning key, he goes about his tasks and he completes his goals. The first thing he does is kill himself. We don't see this. Richtofen is shown kneeling before his body. There are quotes that say, "Richtofen, what did you do to your own body?" But he never explains it. And this is because Treyarch was keeping it secret. They didn't want to reveal what Richtofen was doing, and they didn't want to reveal what his plan was until DLC 2. And in DLC 2, what we see is Richtofen absorb Tank's soul with the summoning key. And suddenly it becomes clear, Richtofen absorbed his soul into the summoning key as well. So following Der Eisendrache, we had 3 souls in the summoning key. The Shadow Man, Richtofen, and then Tank. As we moved on to Zetsubou no Shima, we did the same thing, this time collecting Takeo's soul. We now have 4 people in the summoning key. Once we complete this map and then move on to DLC 3, which we assume to be Stalingrad, we'll probably, assuming nothing goes wrong, collect Nikolai's soul. And with all 4 souls plus the Shadow Man, we should be ready to do and complete whatever Richtofen has up his sleeves. Of course, he keeps everything secret. He's always very cryptic about his goals, and we won't find out until the end. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is some kind of backlash by having the Shadow Man in the summoning key. And that's why I wanted to bring this up. I wanted to remind everyone what is exactly going on inside the summoning key, because that's just as important as whatever Richtofen plans to be doing later on in the map. Otherwise, we wouldn't be collecting these souls. That's going to wrap things up for this episode of the Zombie Storyline Q&A. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like and maybe subscribe. As always, you can leave your questions down below or tweet me at JohnnyJ25 with your questions. And I would really appreciate it if you followed me on Twitter. Like I said, we're getting very close to 10,000 followers, and I would love it if we can hit that number. I'd really think that'd be awesome. I'm going to go, though. Have a fantastic day, and bye.